I'd like to think I've got a loud enough voice, so you should be able to hear me. You'll probably tell from my accent that I'm not Liverpool born and bred, but I have been here since 2002. My children are both proud Scousers, and I love this city. It's got a long history of social enterprise, of radical challenge. It's a city that's suffering under Tory austerity at the moment, and it's a place where vibrant communities are really trying to develop interesting ideas about the future. So you're welcome to my city. I hope you have a lovely time. We managed to host the Transition Towns movement here a couple of years ago as well, and they had a great time. I first heard about alternative currencies in about 1992, when I was a 28-year-old doing my Masters in Peace Studies at the University of Bradford. And I heard about a crazy idea that communities are able to create their own currencies. And I thought, what a load of codswallop, that's never going to work, is it, in a million years? Didn't Robert Owen try to do that in the 1820s, and that didn't go very far? What a mad idea. And I ended up doing a PhD where I looked at one of the most exciting of the 1990s alternative currency networks, Manchester Let's, which got 650 odd people trading with a currency for some time in Manchester. And that showed very much how wrong I was. So what I want to do is go through what we think we know about alternative currencies. Well, what I think I know. There are other views. Other people will put their own views across. Michael Linton, who founded Let's, once politely said to me, "Pete, your work is interesting, but you're picking over roadkill. You need to be thinking about the future and what the future opportunities are." I politely disagree. I think we need to know what our history is, what our successes are, so we can make sure that we don't recreate old mistakes and that we're building on solid ground. Because we know these things work, but not always. Some work better than others for certain groups of people. So Jem will be following on with some of the more electronic versions of currencies for the future, which I don't know anything about. So I will put my hands up to that straight away. So, let's go forward. No?
Just don't use the cursor.
Doesn't seem to want to go forward. Okay, so this idea that I was told back in 1992 that I thought was a load of old rubbish, and is actually true, is that the money we have in our pockets is just what us academics call a social construction. It's actually just a piece of paper that says, I promise to pay the bearer on demand the sum of £10. If you go to the Bank of England and ask for £10, you'll just get a funny look. You used to get gold, but you don't get anything now. This is just a social construction. Money works because we all experience in our life that the money that the banks create, and that we get in our wages, or we get in rental income, or we get in dividends, works when we buy stuff. It isn't actually anything real. It's not like gold. It once was, but it isn't now. So if governments and banks can create money, can ordinary people create money? Or is that a utopian idea? Will people think, this is monopoly money? Yes, you can create money. I could create money. I could write £5 on a £5 note right now, but would I be able to get anything with it? Would anybody else take it seriously? So what I've been looking at over the past 20 years is situations where people like ourselves do successfully create money that other people also believe is money and will exchange their time or goods with us, so it acts like the money that states create. And the good news is that people can create money. It doesn't just have to rely on banks and states. If we look at Argentina, and I'll talk about that in a couple of minutes, you'll see millions of people surviving the sort of financial crisis that we're seeing in Greece at the moment using the alternative currency. So the theory works, and alternative currencies work in certain environments. Go to the next one, please. There's a long history of them. This is a picture of Rob Hopkins that started the transition movement outside the railway station in Virgil in Austria. In the 1930s, in Germany, Austria, Switzerland, lots of people responded to that crisis by creating their own forms of scrip or paper currency. Across the United States, millions of citizens during that Great Depression used paper currencies to survive that crisis. Going back further into history, in the 1880s, the populist movement, who had very similar politics to Bernie Sanders in the United States at the moment, created a huge movement arguing for silver, not gold money, for soft money that communities and businesses can use, not money that is restricted by bankers to make us go to work. Argued for that. Mass popular movement. 1892, the presidential election was about the form of money. Going back into the further past, anarchists and utopians like Robert Owen argued for money created on currency, money created on time rather than related to national currencies. So there is a long history of this kind of thing. So apologies if this is old rope to some of you here, but some of you might be unaware. I basically think there are 5 sorts of currencies that we can think about. Let's, time money, hour-based paper money like the transition currencies, the Bristol pound connected to the national pound, or in Germany to the euro, and some of the more electronic currencies emerging into the future. There's other models, perhaps connected to energy, that we can think about, but I won't cover those at the moment. So these are the 5 versions I'm going to go through, and I think there are strengths and weaknesses of each one. So let's is perhaps the oldest one. We tend to think in the UK that it was an idea that was around in the 1990s and is no longer with us. Although, is anybody still a member of an active let's system here? So some of you still are, great. So you know that these things can work for some time. Early versions working before the use of the internet, so people would create a directory where everybody would share the goods and services they wanted to exchange with each other with their telephone numbers. You create your own currency, perhaps the favour, the Oliver, the brick for Brixton. My favourite one in Manchester was the bobbin. Is anybody here from Manchester? If you say that's bobbins in Manchester, what does that mean? It means it's rubbish, yeah. So we might want to think about the moneyness of our economies. That was a really, really funny idea in a way, because it was meant to say money itself is rubbish. What's important is our skills. What's important is the goods and services which you can exchange with each other. The little bits of money are absolute rubbish. They're valueless. The other side of the bobbin is from the cotton trade. That was used to be the piece of wood that cotton was all put on. So that the bobbin itself that the cotton was wrapped around was valueless. The valuable stuff was the cotton. So people would trade with each other, phoning each other up, paying each other with a currency that they created themselves. Sometimes it would be linked to the pound, sometimes it would be linked to the hour, sometimes it would be linked to a version of the two. Now some of these in some places here, particularly Australia and New Zealand, they got 20 years experience of trading these currency schemes, so they work pretty well. Perhaps the downside of them was that it was perhaps more difficult to get businesses to get involved, so you're limited to exchanging the goods and services that ordinary people have got. And that's a lot, but perhaps if you want to get business involved, it wasn't the best model. Time banking was a version of currency that is still very, very active. Anybody here involved in a time bank? Yeah, again, a couple of people here. Difference between time banking and let's is that there is no connection to national currency. And the advantage there is that the government says if you're unemployed or you're on sickness benefits and you're helping other people out using these time credits, it doesn't affect your benefits in any way, shape or form. And one person's hour is worth another person's hour. Absolute equality. Example of that, the good thing about that was it valued people equally. Downside of it was a lawyer might say, actually, I think I'm worth 20 hours for your 1 hour as a cleaner. So you'd have problems with getting some people to join it. Time banks work very well because they would generally run on a social service model. You get an organisation like this to run a time bank as a service to vulnerable people in the community. If you needed help, you'd phone the organisation up and they would make sure that you got the help that you needed. With a let's, often people would say in their directory, I will do this. The reality on a cold winter's night might be that they might not turn up. It might not be the necessary quality. That's okay if it's a group of people that like to share with each other. But if you've got somebody vulnerable and in need, it's not really good enough. So that can be a great model if you're working with a community that has got vulnerable needs. Just a couple of quotes you can look at yourself. What I really liked about let's and time banking was this idea that it was valuing people that the mainstream economy doesn't include. It was saying precisely the opposite of what our lawyer said. Everybody's time is equal, everybody has skills, everybody should get involved. We need to focus on the skills our community has rather than the money that we have. Oh, sorry, I've gone for that one. So next one. Anybody heard of Ithaca Hours? Oh, a lot more people heard of Ithaca Hours. I think it's interesting. As far as I'm aware, there aren't any hour-based currencies in the UK, are there? No. I think this is great. This was the equivalent of LETS in United States. The trouble with LETS is once you have a directory and you have a database of your members, the IRS, the American Revenue Service, wants to know what's going on. And the people organising a LETS scheme have a duty in the United States to report all that information to the tax office, which we don't have over here. Obviously, that's a major problem. Ithaca Hours is in Ithaca, upstate New York. It's where Cornell University is. It's a radical place. It's like a Totnes or a Stroud. It's a place where a lot of people in the 1960s that really didn't want to go and have their heads blown off in Vietnam would wind up in on the way to Canada. It's the high street is called the Commons. It's a place with a big farmers market, a big Whole Foods cooperative. It's the kind of place where alternative-minded people congregate. And they weren't interested in an alternative currency linked to the US dollar. For them, the US dollar is an imperialist currency linked to wars and invasions and all sorts of things they don't want to be associated with. What I particularly like about this one was this did start to get into working with businesses. And that's quite exciting, because if you think of a database like a time bank or a LETS scheme, if every time you go into a shop and you want to buy something, they need to write it down on the computer or write it down in a ledger, that's quite slow. A business is not really going to be interested in doing that. If you've got a paper currency, it's in and out of tills very, very quickly, just like ordinary cash. But what's interesting about this is if you look at the US dollars all look the same. They're actually quite boring. That was a money-saving thing done in the 1930s. To save on printing costs, but the money is physically not very attractive. If you look at those, they are very, very attractive. They say in Ithaca we trust, rather than in God we trust, or in the United States we trust. There's no evil-eyed pyramid on them. It's also got, they've got a salamander, but what they have on their notes is things that they care about in their local community. So there's a waterfall, there's a tram line, there's Native American people over there. So this is a version of a currency that is still based on time, but the businesses can share. Have a currency based on time if we all agree, as I do, that everybody's time is equal to each other. That works. But how many hours for a fridge? How many hours for a slice of pizza? The point about paying each other with money is that we can chop a big purchase up with lots of small purchases. Would you exchange a slice of pizza for a car? Obviously not. You need to break down the car into money, then you can buy the pizza that you want. The difficulty that they had with just having it based on time with no reference to the US dollar was that how do you buy a slice of pizza that costs 70 cents? So what they did was they introduced their own minimum wage. This was the Reagan period, so there was no minimum wage whatsoever. They said everybody's time is equal and everybody's time is worth $10 an hour. So an Ithaca hour is worth $10. So they introduced from below their own local minimum wage, which I think is absolutely fantastic. The thing I think to think about there is the quality of the note. It's got watermarking on it. It's got numbers on it. It's signed by the people running it. The community themselves decide how much the currency to issue. So it's democratically controlled people's money based on hours, but it's convertible into national currency as well. So we're starting to get there. Next. That's what they say about what they're trying to do with their currency. Build their local economy, revitalise their community, all good stuff. Argentina is where it really took off. 2001, mass crisis in the economy. Literally, the economy fell apart. 3 presidents had to resign in one day. Mass riots outside the Casa Rosada. The president had to flee in a helicopter, 36 people shot. The economy fell apart. People started occupying the streets to talk about how to move forward. People whose factories were closed down occupied them and started running them themselves. Unemployed people started blocking roads, demanding justice. So, a quasi-revolutionary situation. The thing about Argentina that's interesting is that they've never really had solid money that has lasted over a long period of time. Those of you that are old enough to remember UK money before decimalisation, it used to be LSD, didn't it? When that goes right back to the Roman Libri Solari Denari. So we have had the pound looking like a pound for a very, very, very long time. Argentina, that hasn't been the case. They've had the peso, they've had the austral, they've had the new peso, they've had the peso that's linked to the US dollar, they've had the peso that's not linked to the US dollar. So they're used to money changing. They've got experience of hyperinflation in their life of 300, 400, 500, 1,000%. They're used to being able to, in the 1990s, to have to leave work to go and get what they needed because they wouldn't be able to afford it in an hour's time. They got to a situation where it's one of the largest countries in the world, 36 provinces. The provinces are allowed to issue their own currency. Businesses are allowed to issue their own currency. So it's a place where the state doesn't have a monopoly of currency issue, as is the case here, and people are used to doing something more interesting. So you literally got thousands and thousands and thousands, and then millions of people using these currencies in the year 2000. And here you'll notice it says credito, to value human energy. So this wasn't linked either to hours or to the Argentine peso. It was a value of human credit. The one on the top there, Zona West, which is the west zone of Buenos Aires, that was actually issued by a businessman that could see what was happening to the community he was living in. He was retired. He knew what he was doing. You'll notice on that there's a numbering system. There is the little sign there that's made of gold to show that it's not being forged. Really, really, really high quality banknote. This guy organised for food to come from outside Buenos Aires into the area, managed this effectively. This was a really, really, really important scheme that meant that people in Buenos Aires that are having a really hard time, as they're having in Greece at the moment, literally didn't starve. Incredibly impressive experience. You look at the one underneath it from Mesopotamia, which is the northern part of Argentina. That looks just like a piece of paper, a slip. That helped people get through a crisis. The trouble is that if you have something that's just linked to human value, not linked to hours or to pounds, again, how do we value that? How much value, human value, for a piece of pizza? The difficulty you had was in time, you got inflation through that network. The politicians could say, you're out of control, this is an insurrectionary situation, just as they've said in Greece recently, we need to gain control of the situation. And the political party in charge, the Peronists, attacked it to say you're being robbed, you're being ripped off, this is criminals, and people rapidly lost confidence overnight. So with setting up a currency, you need to think about, can people forge it? Are they likely to forge it? Are people going to trust it? What happens when people lose trust in it? And particularly, what does it look like? Look at the design. If you see this one from Zona West, it looks as good as the kind of note that a state would issue. So I'm just going to show you some pictures of how people traded with this. This is a closed down factory in Buenos Aires where there was a couple of thousand people trading with each other. People would bring things that they didn't need. People would make pizzas and food. They'd share all sorts of things with each other. People would be queuing up overnight to get into these places. Sometimes they were lovely environments where people could meet their friends and trade and look after each other through the crisis. They could frankly do with this in Greece at the moment, where they don't have this. Other places have got a little bit more problematic. People would organise getting food in from outside the area into people's homes. And particularly what was important, and I think this is a take-home message for setting up alternative currencies here, they made sure that people understood what this was about. So this is Charlie, and he's doing an induction meeting here in one of those closed-down factories to all the people that are joining the currency to make sure that they understand what kind of economy this is. So they would say things like, don't pay an overinflated price. If they're paying too much, say something to them. Bring something to the market that other people need. Give everybody a chance to share in your produce. Have a think about the relationship that you're having with people that you're trading with. Make sure that you're trading with love rather than out of profit. So that getting people to understand how this can be a different form of economy was really, really, really important, I think. It's something Letts and Time Banks did very, very, very well, and perhaps it might be something that we're losing sight of with some of the new currencies. So that's the kind of thing that people would get here. People could literally live off these alternative currencies through that crisis in a way that they can't in Greece at the moment. People that didn't have access to these currencies really, really, really struggled. How are we doing for time? 15 minutes ago, that's good, yeah. So we're all friends, we're a family, it's wonderful, we talk about ideas. I don't think I've got the quote up there, but one of them great quotes was, Charlie, before we met you, we knew each other, now we're friends. We support each other, we live with solidarity, we live with support. It's therapeutic, we're all in the same situation, there's no classes here. So that role of local currencies in creating an alternative form of currency that's not just money that acts like national money, but circulates locally, I think is really, really, really important. I think it's something that Ithaca Hours had, and I think it's something that the Argentine Treque had. In Brazil, they've learnt some of the lessons from that. Things like Banco Palmas and some of the currencies that they're developing in Brazil at the moment are starting to get a little bit more interesting. But people say, is Argentina a good example? Yes and no. It's an example of mass usage, but it all ended very badly. So these are the ones that you're more familiar with. I think one of the lessons here for me is looking at the quality of some of the notes here. You look at that Lewis pound. Those of us who are old enough to remember what £1 notes look like will remember that. And I love the slogan on there, we have it in our power to make the world anew. I think that idea of giving people a sense of hope and a positive future that's better than the world we live in at the moment is really important. And the role of currencies in conveying that message of hope and something more interesting, I think matters. So I think we're starting to get somewhere now with some of these paper currencies, particularly as we move from the early versions like the topless pound, which were early experiments, did look more like coupons, more like the Argentine versions. Now we're starting to look at the Brixton pound and the Bristol pound and the Lewis pound, starting to have what I call moneyness. It's that feeling that this is serious. It is only a piece of paper, it is only a social construction, but people need to believe that this is not monopoly money. And I think it's very interesting when I've looked at some of the early alternative currencies, if I contrast, without having to go at Stroud, that the Stroud currency was interesting, but it was done quicker and with less resources than the Lewis pound. And I think you can see the difference there. Literally the paper that the Lewis pound was on feels exactly the same as national currency paper does. And I think that really, really matters. And I think the way that the Lewis pound was the first one to really take off and get large numbers of businesses using it was about this point about moneyness. But the downside, I suppose, is the fact that it does look so much like national money. It looks like an old £1 note. It's got the slogan of building a better world. But there's always the issue there that when your currency is backed by national money, how much of a benefit can you get with playing around and thinking about different ways of valuing community, valuing money, valuing work, if it is linked directly to pound notes? The benefit, of course, is that businesses take it seriously. So you can start to get it into businesses and people will think this is an alternative form of currency. People will then realise that the sky didn't fall in, it wasn't the end of the world, communities can create high quality currencies, and then perhaps in 10 years' time we can start to move on to ways that we are deepening local production, getting more of the goods and services that we need in our local community, more power generated locally, more food created and grown locally. We can start to really create a vibrant, humane economy, living a sort of solidaristic economy that I want to see. But we perhaps got to go through that stage of having money that, for me, looks a little bit too much like national money. So from those early days with the topless pound, the first experiment, getting there with the Lewis pounds, now we're starting to see very, very serious alternative currency, local currencies in Brixton and in Bristol. And you'll hear more about those at the moment. But I think these are really, really, really impressive achievements. Again, I would draw attention to this point of moneyness. This is really sexy money, isn't it? If money can ever be sexy. But it really does look good. And I really think it's fantastic that the Brixton people have put one of my heroes on, C.L.R. James, the Jamaican Trotskyist, the guy that wrote the Black Jacobins, bringing back that history from places we're in at the moment. I really like the way that we're telling stories of our place and the importance of our place and the importance of the people that live in that place. I'm a geographer, I would say that, but I think that the importance of money in creating a sense of national identity is really important, and the fact that the Argentines never did that, and we've done that incredibly well with our pound. We're seeing that with all these debates about Brexit at the moment, that psychological, spiritual, affective feelings around national identity can be recreated at a local level really brilliantly by Ithaca Hours, and really brilliantly, I think, by the Brixton pound and by the Bristol pound. Again, as a geographer, I'm interested in what we mean by a local currency. If you want businesses to use your currency, great, but where do businesses get the stuff that they sell from? Do they produce it locally? Now, there's a hard question there, that if you've got a place like Brixton, which is a local authority border, it's not an economic space. It's a political administrative space, or it's a community space. Very little is produced in Brixton. Very little is produced in a small town like Lewes. Now, that's because of globalisation. That is the whole point of these, that we think it's crazy that we ship milk all around the world produced in Britain and import milk from somewhere else here. We want a more resilient economy where we are producing more of the things that we need locally. And that is the point. But at the moment, we can't produce that stuff locally because globalisation has gone too far. So what we want to do is create a space where we can have enough of the produce that we need in an everyday life produced locally. And that's perhaps where we're going. So when you're setting up a currency, I think, what do you mean by local matters? And it's a case of getting it big enough that you've got enough production, possibly in the future, created in it, and small enough that there's that sense of local identity. 5 minutes, yeah? And I think that matters, and I don't think we've got that right at the moment. I think where Bristol, we'll hear about that in a bit, but where Bristol talks about Bristol and its hinterland, I think that's right. But what if we had, say, a Yorkshire currency? Or something bigger than that? To some extent, we've got a local currency in the UK compared with the euro. It's called the pound. We've already got a local currency. It's what kind of local currency do we need? So I love the fact that this has become normal. This is not hippie. These are a couple of people working in Brixton, wearing the clothes that ordinary young people wear, and it's going in that supermarket there. So again, that is one of the issues. To what extent do we want mainstream businesses to use our local currency to normalise it? And to what extent are we prepared to make deals with what business needs by doing things like keeping it backed to the pound? If we then wanted to create our own production by loaning out our local currency, which we believe we've created and we have created, and we de-link it from national currency, will business start to take that seriously, or will they see this as Mickey Mouse or worse, something rather dodgy? In a place like Liverpool, where there is a history of black market dealings and informal activities, that is something to think about. How serious and credible is your currency? And one of the issues that I found, which was a horrible, horrible, horrible academic research experience, was when I went to the United States, to the Berkshires, where it's one of the big stories you hear about the Berkshires' local currency. I talked to local businesses, and they hated it. They absolutely hated it. They thought this was a problem. They said, this is the price of doing business in our area. We have to deal with this crap currency. So I think it's important to take local businesses with you and have structures whereby if local businesses don't like what's going on, and worse, if it's hurting their business, if you're hurting the very people you're trying to help, that's problematic. So I think it's good that now the local currencies have structures where it's clear that there are feedback mechanisms to make sure that businesses are involved. We've also realised, that wasn't realised in the early days, how much work it is not only to set up a local currency, and setting up a paper currency is a lot of work, but keeping it going. You need to keep going out, talking to businesses about how it's working with people. All of these currencies have ended up with people who've got skills in high demand, getting too many of them, not being able to spend them, getting fed up and leaving. With the currencies that are backed by sterling, not quite so much of a problem because you can just convert it back to sterling, but if it is just one trade from you to the shopkeeper, back into the bank, back to the next person, we're perhaps not deepening our local currency scheme. That's just one of the quotes from Stroud, which I love. This feels like anarchy. This is a big V to the supermarkets. I really like that attitude. Okay, so this is what I would go through if I had a little bit more time. I think we need to, and I'll just quickly run through it. So I've got perhaps 1 more minute, 2 more minutes?
Yeah, 1 minute.
1 minute, yeah. Okay. Think about who you're looking to involve with. If it's an alternative group of people that want to trade goods and services and they're not worried about businesses, Let's are really, really good. If you're looking to involve vulnerable people, Let's perhaps leaves them a little bit left alone. A time bank is really good, but it won't involve businesses. If you think it's a problem that the current economy values cleaners less than lawyers, an hour-based currency works really, really, really well. We haven't done enough experimentation around that in Britain, I think. And I think that works very, very well. As long as there's a way of converting it to national currency so you get over the problem, how many hours for a slice of pizza. The transition currencies starting to get more serious, being taken much more seriously, but we need to think about ways that we can deepen our local network so we're producing more of the things we need at the moment, which is the whole point of it. And then we need to think about what we mean by the local, and we need to think about how serious our currency is. The future might be electronic. I perhaps am not quite so interested in that, but Jen will take that further. Okay, thank you.